Hey everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. Queen of English class. Very short, but it made me smile. And I recently had 9th graders attempt the same thing with similar results, only it went on to discuss the grammar of the lyrics. Background. I work in Tohoku, Japan as an English teacher. If you ever get a chance, please come, it's worth visiting. I love my job and I'm very good at it. However, kids are kids and sometimes you get a class that's very authority adverse. This class was one of those and rather stressful. I'm not a cool teacher. I come to school in skirts and dresses, I'm plus sized, I'm 30, they know I have a 2-year-old and I'm generally looked at as the mom teacher. This took place last year after the Queen movie came out and We Will Rock You was extremely popular. These kids had been monsters all year. They caused me to cry more than once. I had used my angry mom voice more than once, and the Japanese teacher 1, T1, was at a loss of what to do. The story. The teacher 1 was trying to teach where do you want to go as the grammar point, and one of the little darlings decided to start the We Will Rock You beat. The rest of the class followed. At first, the teacher 1 tried to talk over it, but the kids just got louder by banging on desks. He looked at me helpless because he didn't know what it was from. I was tired. I was fed up. It was Friday. See, my parents raised me on Claw 2, Styx, Billy Joel, Little River Band, and Queen. I knew this song. I waited for the appropriate beat, I ran through the first verse, I sung the refrain. Here's what they saw. Chubby mom that they're used to seeing with a 2-year-old on her hip, small town, in a long skirt and green sweater with love and flowers embroidered on it, singing the most punk rock song they know at the top of her lungs. Snakes would have been envious of the jaw-dropping. The fallout. Not much happened. I turned the beat into a way for them to chant, where do you want to go? And for that class at least, we got through without any more incident. Next week was back to wrestling with the class like normal, but apparently they told all their friends, and so I had to sing it for the 4th and 5th graders the next Thursday. They've graduated and I'm not at the junior high school they went to. It made me laugh though, and made that day a bit easier. So if they started making the beat, would you be able to get up there and sing it? It's a great song. If you have a favorite Queen song, let me know in the comment section down below. I'll get right on that, sir. In a prior post and comment, Paralyzed78 made the following edited comment. My army dad worked for USDA. They had those big old dot matrix green bar wide paper printers and a couple of daisy wheel beasts along with old Selectric 2s. This reminded me of another incident while I was in service, 79 to 83. There was this one staff officer that no one liked. He was arrogant, condescending, and yet blindingly ignorant and ignorant of his own ignorance at the same time. As I was nearing the end of my indenture to the gods of mainframes and transitioning over to the glories of working on Unix timeshare instead, this officer and I kept running into each other. He would knowingly tell me things like, "Programs written by hand in assembly will always be faster than anything you write in C." I would nod along and then add in, "Based on the skill of the programmer, sir." And he would agree, not knowing that I had just disagreed with him. So that's a brief picture of the guy. So anyway, there's this old kind of plasma display terminal called a Tektronic. The program paints the screen one time with a plot, and the display keeps a memory of the plot on the screen. Then you activate a program code to wipe the screen when you're done looking at it. It looked a lot like this plasma screen, except newer and larger. I'd written this very cool program to chart growth and unplanned spending based on contractor and program, like Rockwell on the Bomber program. You could use the plasma effect to overlay each year or month on top of each other with a single, simple command. It was really hot stuff, and I got a lot of praise for it. The data was classified as secret or top secret, depending on the plot. So having a private terminal in a secured office was a great convenience. So the officer referenced above takes a huge liking to my program and asks me to make one just like it for his data set. No problem. I got my program extended to cover his data pretty quickly and then showed it off. He loved it. So far, so good. Then, this major, pain in the butt, has a flash of utter brilliance. He wants to be able to print this data out. It's not enough that he can take notes off the screen. No, he wants it printed. Now, did I mention that this data is classified? I tried to tell the major that the data would require a chain of custody for reports from the printers downstairs all the way to his office. And that can only happen once a day, in the morning. He does not like this restriction, but he still wants his plot printed out. He ponders the Gordian conundrum for a time, and then has another utterly brilliant notion. He leads me over to a corner of the office and points to an IBM Selectric typewriter/printer. This printer is hooked up over a secure line to the same machine that is plotting the data, he says. Just print it out here. I try to explain to him that this is a bad idea. It will be difficult, it will be slow, and it will probably be a waste of time. He tells me that he will be the judge of what is a waste of time. Now, by this time in my life in the service, I have learned to smile, nod, and get the order in writing, so that's what I do. Sir, please send a request to my boss for that use and I'll get right on it. I spend the next week or so down in my office area working out how to use asterisk and comma and slash and dash to plot data on a dang typewriter. But I get it done. When it's done, I go upstairs and tell the major that the plotter is working and that he can now run reports on the printer in his office. He fires up the display program, selects his data, and plots it on the display terminal. Then with glee he presses the new print display feature with the stylus. Time passes. Then the IBM typewriter goes hum, coming to life. Then it goes clack clack clack, printing out the date, the data set name, and his name and classification. Then it advances 2 lines. Then it goes silent for a moment. Then it goes space 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 space. Then it prints a dot. Then it advances 1 line. Then it pauses to buffer data again. Then it spaces over and prints ... etc. He looks at me, he looks at the printer, then at me. Why is this so slow? Sir, the IBM Selectric model, whatever, has a data buffer of 64 characters. What does that mean? I smile and explain that the plotter is asking the mainframe for 64 characters at a time, and that the request has to buffer in the request queue in the mainframe before being responded to. And that was the end of my plotter programming adventure. So basically, they didn't listen to your concerns because they thought the printer would be adequate, but in reality the printer can only read 64 individual letters basically, type that all out, and then have to go back to the program to get the next 64 letters, and then go back and print that back out again. So it's an incredibly slow printer. I can see how that would very quickly get shut down. Go get it yourself? Okay then. Since my last dad story went over pretty well, I thought I'd share another. It's a short one, but it felt very satisfying when it happened. This happened when I was just a kid, maybe 11 years old. Actually, this happened frequently during my childhood, but it's the only time I've been petty enough to not just ignore it. My dad would occasionally put his foot down and announce a new house rule. Usually it would have been something to do with chores, catering to his own laziness, or general behavior that annoyed him at the moment. The usual way of dealing with these rules were to just ignore them until he forgot about them a few weeks later, but this time was different. I figure by the rule that it must have been morning when it was implemented. We'd sit together and have breakfast, whereas my spot at the table was by the window, his was closest to the fridge. I had only gotten a small splash of milk on my Cheerios, so I asked my dad if he would get me a new one from the fridge, since he was closest anyway. That was apparently the wrong thing to say, because he then loudly announced that he was implementing a new rule. Whoever emptied the milk has to be the one to get another one. This irked me. I thought I'd asked pretty nicely if he'd get it, so I made note of that rule, got myself milk, and started the wait. It didn't take long, maybe 4 weeks or so. You can probably see where this is headed. We're back at breakfast, except I only just about managed to sit down when Dad empties the last of the milk into his coffee, leaving his oats sad and dry. I'm having toast on this particular morning and as such wouldn't need any milk for a while. Dad says, "OP, go get another milk for the table." "Go get it yourself." "What? Don't talk back to me, just do it right now." "I'm just following your own rule, Dad. Remember? Whoever emptied the milk has to be the one to get another one. You said so yourself. Mom says you did actually say that." So alas, Father had to bite the bullet and get his own milk that day. He was a bit more reluctant to enforce rules after that. Until the reluctance went out the same ear as the rules were seemingly escaping from. But it felt so satisfying watching him eat his own words with a splash of cold, fresh milk. That's what I like to see, OP. If a parent is trying to make a rule and enforce it, they have to follow that same rule too. It's only fair. "I don't care, bring in your homework tomorrow." This happened several years ago when I was in elementary school. I was out of school for a couple of weeks because of chicken pox. When I started to feel better, I started to try to catch up with my schoolwork. I didn't use my desk, so everything was laid out on my floor. My parents had just rescued a pregnant greyhound. She got into my room and went into labor on top of my homework. The next day, I told my teacher what had happened and asked if I could have a little more time to redo it. She replied saying that she would believe it when she saw it. I shrugged and said okay. My parents put said homework into Ziploc bags for me to give her. I turned in my homework as required. She threw it away and gave me the extension. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that a teacher like that wouldn't have tried to get you in some kind of trouble for bringing papers with unidentifiable substances on them. But hey, it worked, so good for OP. It's the zombie apocalypse. Working in an essential big orange box store, I've seen every kind of face covering imaginable. Bandanas, scarves, respirators, dust masks, plastic shields, gaiters, motorcyclist masks, t-shirts, hand-sewn handkerchiefs, socks and rubber bands, you name it. This guy took the cake. Points for creativity. He didn't just have a mask, he had a full-on costume. He was a thin, bald black man already, but wore baggy, tattered gray pants, a threadbare, torn gray shirt, and a hockey mask that was cracked and gray. Rather a zombie Jason. I loved it and it made me laugh out loud. However, part of my job now was to make sure folks were following guidelines, and if that was just a Halloween prop, I'd have to ask him to leave the store. Yeah, we're that strict round here. Because the mask had holes in it at the nose and mouth, nobody else had approached him. Maybe they were afraid of being bitten? But he was definitely shopping the automotive aisle, shambling along with a jaunty basket in his black nitrate-gloved hands. Do zombies still catch viruses? Viruses aren't really alive, so can they affect the dead? Well, this walking corpse wasn't about to find out. Upon closer inspection, along with his protective gloves, he was wearing a proper black cloth PPE covering under his hockey mask. Good on the undead slasher. I had to comment, "You're really having fun with this, aren't you?" Was all he had to say as he shuffled away. Some people make the best of bad situations, especially in ways that make others laugh, and this is definitely a guy that does that. It's mandatory. Back in 2006, I worked for a small college as the sole IT guy. The Christmas party was coming up and I was pretty excited because I've always loved the culture of these things and was amped to go. The thing I didn't realize was that they wanted me to set up everything and maintain it while the party was going on. Essentially telling me I was working for free. I told them I wasn't going to make the party, and then the president said, "It's mandatory," so I went. I clocked in and had a blast. Probably the easiest 5 hours of overtime I've ever earned. Afterwards, the comptroller noticed the overtime and was ready to write me up before I told him what the president said, that it was mandatory and I was going to be working the entire time. Didn't drink, wasn't an open bar anyway. He kind of laughed and said, "Well, it's mandatory, so we have to pay you." My question is, why does the IT guy have to set the party up and maintain it? What does that have to do with a party at all? I'm guessing some IT guy before them probably managed the party, so they just assumed that it would continue with this guy? I don't know. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know which story and why in the comment section down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.